Morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
So now we have our Banks Peninsula Community Board, Nigel and Ruben. So, well, fire away. You're up.
Now, we don't normally do self-drive, so please forgive us if there are technical issues with the presentation this morning. Thank you for the opportunity to share our oral submission to the draft annual plan on behalf of the board and of our Banks Peninsula communities. So far it works.
Well done.
So our whakatauki that we consider through the work on the board is Ngā Tororo, Ngā Taku Roro Ka Ora Ai Te Iwi. Listen to and work with community, mana whenua, partners and other organisations to protect and enhance the environmental, social, cultural and economic well-being of Banks Peninsula.
We've become very aware of flood mitigation, of the severe weather events over the last 2 years, and we really are concerned and we will want maybe some thought about broadening the scope from the areas around Littleton to bring them to Akaroa. They've had 4 flooding events down around the recreation ground, and some mitigation work needs to be done around that. And going forward, there's some very low points and some huge flooding issues all over the peninsula.
Yeah, it doesn't just float our historic cottages. It's also taking out roads and vital infrastructure and access in our eastern bays, which isolates these communities. And there are also many occasions when the name is no longer appropriate. The name Little River is no longer appropriate for Wairewa. Probably worth noting that the English translation of Wairewa is in fact water lifted up, as you can see here. So this really leads us to a strong priority for Banks Peninsula and a clear ask of council, which is that proactive planning for climate change. So the ask of council is simple, but it is really loud, and it's coming from right across our communities, across Te Pātaka or Rākaihautū Banks Peninsula. So the Coastal Hazards Adaptation Planning Program is currently underway in Whakaropo, Littleton Harbour. That's by way of the Coastal Hazards Adaptation Working Group, the Adaptation Panel, and some amazing community consultation which have been both informative, inclusive and empowering for our communities. But the ask is that we need to move faster, and that the board strongly believe that Akaroa and the Eastern Bays need to be included earlier in the Coastal Hazards Adaptation Planning Program.
Right. We really want to see the continuation of the improving of the infrastructure, and thank the council for the efforts around the wharves so far, but there's still more wharves and jetties to be done. And of course, improve the infrastructure and supporting resilience around the community with these structures, as getting in and out of some of these areas will be a problem in the future. We need to increase funds for repair and maintenance and continuance through these next annual plan and LTP.
Our communities also want to be connected, and they also want to feel protected, and in particular on Banks Peninsula, that's from what we call antisocial road users, politely. Ko tuitui smart poles are a really good way that we can improve connectivity in the community. So these feature Wi-Fi, police-linked CCTV, public address facilities and lighting features. So they're a real asset to community at any point, but particularly in times of crisis, and also to help with monitoring and policing for some of our more remote communities. So the board is partnering with New Zealand Police and communities across the peninsula to identify the hotspots, and our ask of council is that funding be allocated to pilot these installations in the annual plan, with further permanent rollouts provisioned in the long-term plan.
We want good social and physical connections for our communities. This is a photograph of the tennis courts in Akaroa. This is a community issue. It's not about rich people going over to Akaroa to play tennis or anywhere else on the peninsula. We feel that they don't have the same upkeep and focus as the city ones do, and we would like to see some more work in supporting those community assets.
Okay, and the Akaroa Museum, we were lucky enough to pay a visit as a board to the Akaroa Museum recently. We wanted to speak specifically in support of the museum. It's an outstanding council-owned asset with a really important and impressive collection of local taonga that are part of our shared peninsula history and story. And so the ask there is that funding must be at least maintained, if not increased, to protect and respect what is a very rich cultural asset on the peninsula. The board has also looked very closely at the council properties proposed for disposal. It supports the identified properties, but really strongly reminds council that we do not support the disposal of land in Hunters Road, Diamond Harbour, and that the Diamond Harbour community deserves the outline development plan to be developed. And at this point, we shift to questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. Well done. So we've got Sarah, then Tim, then Pauline.
Thank you. A couple of quick ones. Notice from the photos that you got, I completely agree about the climate adaptation stuff, the coastal hazards. The photos clearly showed, though, that that was due to runoff from the hills rather than the coastal flooding and erosion that the coastal hazards adaptation stuff
It's with the severity of
so I know, but I'm just wondering whether the board would support the program of work and how it's framed being expanded into a climate hazards adaptation rather than purely coastal hazards.
Yeah, I think that's something that Nigel and I were discussing even in preparing this report, was that the water was coming from more than one place, sometimes at the same time.
So while we do need some specific coastal stuff, we do need broader climate hazards work for adaptation.
Agreed.
And the Hunter Terrace stuff, we've also had submissions on a current property from people in Diamond Harbour up behind the rec hall that people are keen to keep. Is the board supportive of that one as well?
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks.
Tim?
Yeah, just two quick ones. First, the tennis court maintenance, the photo is a good one, but my understanding in Christchurch, because you're saying the ones in the city, that they're mostly run by clubs and maintained by clubs. So is that connected to a club, or is that totally managed by Parks Unit?
It used to be connected to a club. The club folded, but they've now set up a incorporated society to manage it at a broader subject matter around the community facilities, because the school needed to use those. I played on those when I was at high school when we had Methven and other schools come over, because they don't. Up at the high school, they only have one multi-use court. They want a multi-use court there and some courts, tennis courts, and netball and hockey as well. So it's become a broader. I guess that would be a club of some sort, but it'll be an incorporated society.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yep. So the second one, to smart poles. My understanding from our community board when we discussed this with police and others, the question was that the police to have ability to staff the monitoring of any cameras on them. So have you your discussions with police, if they've been in the same kind of situation or issue, or?
Yeah, so we have currently they're down at Naval Point, and my understanding is that those are being monitored, but it would be part of a wider discussion with police and smart cities around exactly what the resourcing of those looks like.
Cool, thank you.
Beautiful. Pauline?
Yeah, mine was just following on the climate adaptation and coastal hazards adaptation, and you're saying that you want Akaroa to come on board and the bays. Is that the view of the community? Have you had positive feedback from the community about this process?
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
You know, we've had 4 major flooding events in the last 2 years. You know, that we've always had them.
Yeah, but they want to step up to an adaptation piece of work and embrace that.
Yep, they would.
Well, that's really good to know because that's a key role in getting this work done is with the communities.
The community, they would welcome it with open
Great,
arms.
thank you. Cool.
I'll just have a wee question. On all those photos of the flooding, is the problem that can't get, the tide wasn't in, so is the problem is that there's not enough pipes to get it out to the sea, there's not enough sumps, there's not enough stormwater outfalls, is that the issue?
Yes and no. When the tide comes in, the water stops and it rises. And the same thing's happening outside the pharmacy. The pharmacy had about a foot of water through it in the last event. It's coming on. There's 2 low points that need to be focused on. But it is about the water coming off and the tidal surge at the same time. If you get a full moon tide and a flooding event, you've got a real mess on your hand, as was seen in Wainui particularly.
So all of that I saw in those photos was caused by maybe just after a high tide and the flat it couldn't get out.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Tyrone?
Kia ora. Are there any other submissions that that you support in principle that have been lodged?
Yeah, well, I have some in particular. The Civic Trust one, which is focusing on the Britomart Memorial, as part of the history matrix of Akaroa. It needs to have some focus. And the Inuku submission, which is really about the next stage of Takapaniki and building a track from the Takaranga, which is where the Po is, right up into a gate at the Britomart Memorial, tying the 2 together. So both of those submissions are right up the top for us. And I guess there was a submission coming about the multi-use courts situations too, so we're very much behind that.
Yeah, we did hear directly from that group when we were in Akaroa last week, and there's a lot of young families, young kids who aren't currently able to use that facility in the state that it's in. So there's a really strong ask that work happens so that it can be used by the community again. There will also be submissions from both Nancy Vance and Richard Suggett on Diamond Harbour, which we would support, and also with regards to Birdlings Flat, there'll be a submission from Janet Reeves, which the board would support as well.
Okay, no more questions. Thank you very much for coming in. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Okie doke. So now we have Emma and Simon from Papua New Guinea Central.